Well, welcome everybody. As a scientist, I always like to give a frame of reference for the audience that I'm talking to. So can I just get a show of hands who's heard of Ray Avery? Just a show of hands. Just a show of hands. Oh, we're talking 49.257%. Must try harder. Being slightly famous isn't all it's cracked up to be. I was driving to the airport the other morning in a corporate cab, and there was a nice Indian corporate cab driver there with a turban on, and I could sense that he half recognised me, but as soon as I get in the cab, I start texting. There's no mean feat for me because I'm dyslexic, and even I have no idea what I'm texting. You know, it takes a while. But I put my hand up to recognise that I did indeed acknowledge that he did want to speak to me. And then the phone went. One of the reasons that I'm texting is, as a social anthropologist, I understand life, probably more than most people. And it's extraordinary to me as a scientist also that given that the average human being has some 30,000 days to live, that unlike in business where you plan a business and you develop that business, if you're really smart, you have an exit strategy for that business. We don't apply that to all our ordinary lives. One thing that's certain about all of us, our exit strategy is going to be the same. We're all going to die. And for most of you, it's going to be a bloody surprise. It won't be a surprise to me, because I know I've got 5,864 days left. I'm serious, and I know how to use them. So I was actually turning my 5,000 odd days into 15,000 by multitasking, and you can steal time. And I hope at the end of this talk that you'll realise that you can steal time and you can achieve great things. You need to change the way you think about your life. You have an exit strategy. It's not going to be a good one, typically. And I spent a lot of time in politics here. What you need to do is actually reverse engineer your life and pick some benchmarks to say, this is what I'd like to achieve at this particular point in my life, and go for it. So I'm going for it in the back of the cab, trying to get 15,000 days instead of 5,000 days. And the phone went. And I took the phone call, and I could see the guy, corporate cab driver with the Indian turban, was getting more and more concerned. Finally, I could see he was getting so disturbed that I ended the call, and I put the phone down, and he said, "Sir, I have to ask." And I said, "Well, I'm Sir Ray Avery. You may have seen one of the documentaries on the work that I've done for Africa and Asia, particularly in the area of blindness prevention. You may have read my best-selling autobiography, which is in its 6th reprint, Rebel with the Cause. You have noted that I was knighted in the 2011 New Zealand Honours List as a Grand Knight Companion, the highest order of merit in knighthood you can get in New Zealand. You may have also noted that I was voted the most trustworthy person in New Zealand in 2011. He said, "Sir, actually, I just want to know if you want international or domestic." So being slightly famous isn't all it's cracked up to be. I'm going to talk about two things. If I can leave you with two adjectival clauses. One of them would be observation, and the other one would be customer-centric. Observation and customer-centric. These will come through very much in the body of my talk. You'll note, and you'll probably see some people have produced a whole lot of ABA presentations through the course of this conference. It actually is not a good way for people to imbibe information. It's much overused, and in certain times it can be downright dangerous. I've learnt with my work in developing countries, you can never rely on ABA presentations at all. I was in Nepal about 4 or 5 years ago during an international blindness prevention conference. It was my big chance to be one of the big kahunas in the International Association of Blindness Prevention. I was looking to be the chair. The best way that I could achieve that is by giving the most awesome ABA presentation known to man. I had 3 of my technicians working on it. They had 3 screens working in simultaneous harmony. I didn't even need to look at the board because I knew what was going on. I'd just go like that, and whatever I did, it would appear like magic. It was brilliant. Then we took it to Nepal. And we went to the Hotel Yeti, which is one of the most prestigious hotels in Nepal. Now, being a little bit knowledgeable about the backdrop of Nepal, I decided to phone ahead to the hotel and say, "Have you got ABA presentations?" And the man said to me, Sir Ray, you are God in Nepal. We have everything for you. Do not worry, we can do bad. We have everything. You just come. We will look after you. I arrived. It's a big hall. It's normally a restaurant during the day. Nothing. Nada. Not a scared of a microphone, anything. And I said, you told me you could do PowerPoint. He said, look, there is PowerPoint. Look. And that's one of the problems you have with nomenclature in developing countries. It got more difficult because, of course, I said to him, look, there's 1,500 people coming. They won't be able to hear me right at the back. I need at least a microphone and some speakers. And so you've seen those pictures of people climbing Everest, where they have a big thing, a band around their neck, carrying things up Everest. And they sent two poor unfortunate souls out in the afternoon sun to collect speakers. And they came back indeed with speakers the size of Westinghouse double-door fridges. And they put one over there and one over there. They were last used at the Death Row Hotel concert. They hummed when they were switched off. And then they connected them to a big cable the size of the North Sea electrical cable to a microphone the size of the Sky City Tower, which was Chernobyl warm when it was switched off. Anyway, it just got better and better because what I haven't told you, in the folds of the curtains in the hotel in Yeti live a colony of rats. They're huge mothers, the size of Volkswagens. And they just cruise around eating off the crumbs from the tables. Halfway through my ABO presentation, the inevitable happened, one bit into the cable. Instantly electrocuted, throwing a ball of fire, came down in front of me on fire. I'm pretty good at that living. But I'd never seen a flaming rat. And while I was pondering as a scientist the thermal capacity of a aforesaid dying rat, the maitre d' had the good sense to come over and put it out. And then, rather unfortunately, he carried it out past the front row with the American ambassador's wife. This was the moment that my chance of being the chair of the International Association of Blindness Prevention really went tits up, really, quite frankly. And as he carried it out, she said, "Ah, it's a rat!" I said, "Madam, not a rat, just a mouse." And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why you have no PowerPoint. Because it's safer. I was brought up in post-war Britain. My father had been a prisoner of war. He was part of the English expeditionary forces, which went to Germany to find out how strong the German defences were. Evidently, they got quite strong, and he was put in a prisoner of war camp for 5 years. When he got back to good old Blighty, he met my mother, and they took a liking to each other, and I was the result. Unfortunately, they didn't like each other very much. After a few months, they didn't like me even after a little while, and decided that I should be put into orphanages and halfway homes, along with about 450,000 young kids at that time who were from the Blitz. And it's a terrible existence for all of us, simply because there was no orchestrated education system. Everybody was trying to make things up as they went along. There was a lot of brutality in the orphanages themselves from both the caregivers and a kind of Lord of the Rings, kind of Lord of the Flies, composite of young kids trying to work out their way through lives. At school, my education was very limited, but it turned out to be a blessing. I was blessed with the fact that I was short-sighted, and nobody thought to give me glasses because they never checked my eyes, so I couldn't see the board. No idea what was going on. I was also dyslexic, so even though I had seen the board, I wouldn't have understood what they were doing. And I was blessed with also having acute blue ear, so I couldn't hear it. So I had no idea what those blokes were doing at the front. You know, it was a play. But what it did do is it taught me observation. And it's an observation that you all have, but you've forgotten about. And one of the tricks that I'd like to give you, just whenever I meet people, I always want them to be better off. I have a simple philosophy: be better off for knowing Ray Avery. Just for one single thing. And I'm going to give you one gift about communication. Education and knowledge are quite different. Education and knowledge are quite different. Education, for instance, you might know that a tomato is a fruit. But knowledge is knowing not to put the sucker into a fruit salad. Okay, so there's a big difference between between knowledge. And I'll give you a little trick here. I don't know, did somebody pay for this? Because you've done your dough, it's terrible. It's what we call oral vomit, visual vomit. When you're taught to read, you're taught to read from left to right. Whether you like it or not, you're pre-programmed to imbibe all knowledge from left to right. So if you want to make somebody understand something and see it very simply, then paint it from left to right. I learned this. One of the things that happened to me was that I ran away from the orphanage. I practiced running away from the orphanage. I ran away for 2 months, 3 months, and finally, at the age of 13 and a half, I ran away for good and lived under a railway bridge in London. And during the 9 to 10 months I lived under the railway bridge, I started my education. I taught myself about the world. I spent most of my days in libraries reading the Encyclopedia Britannica, which was rather like Google at the time, just to keep warm. I taught myself to read because I was dyslexic by nudging the old guy next to me with a cloth cap and a Ganix raincoat on, and I'd say, "What's this word?" And he'd say, "It's community." And I could photograph that word and remember that that shape was that word. And so I see the world as visual, spatial bits of information. And that makes it easier for me to sell things and market things because I understand how you see the world and I can make it easier for you to read things. The more easier I make it for you to read things, the more you like them. So if you've got a business card and this is the name of your company, you want to have it right over here on the left-hand side, where it's the start of things. And if your governing statement is, "We're the best that we can be," it should be right at the bottom right-hand side, which is where you stop reading on the page. And it's as simple as that. All your ads should read from left to right. If you don't believe me, I remember going to the Tate Gallery and looking at pictures and seeing how things were painted and finding out which ones I liked best. The irony is that a lot of them are painted from right to left, because if you're right-handed and you do a profile, that's the way you paint somebody. So sometimes you stuff things up just because of one particular other inflection. But trust me, if you paint a painting left to right, you take a mirror image of it, put it the other way around, you will like the left to right one. In fact, a survey will tell you that 98.7% like a painting painted from left to right. There's also colours and a whole lot of things. But that's my one gift to you. Get your business card from left to right, fire that guy. Now, there I am living under the railway bridge trying to work out who I am. In the absence of any guidance from parental guidance, I was cash rich. I actually had 3 paper rounds. I did one in the morning, one in the evening, and one I subcontracted to one of my friends. Because I was always a social entrepreneur. And my touchstone for male-female relationships was Women's Weekly. You can imagine what that was like in 1953, you know? And I thought that marriage was I thought if I did get married, I'd get married to a woman in a white dress, I'd help her across a street, there would be a few birds playing in the background and a few bandies jumping around and music playing. And that's love, you know, because I thought, and if you're a young man of 13 and a half, sort of coming to puberty, that would be your touchstone. But in life, as in business, there are defining moments. And all businesses and entities have to have defining moments. If you don't have defining moments, you need to orchestrate them. Otherwise, you won't be customer-centric. I'll explain what that means later on. But this little boy living under the railway bridge, he had a defining moment. He was reading and teaching himself to read. He felt free because he had his own light switch. He had his own little torch that he could turn on and off. For the first time in his life, instead of a light switch where 30 kids were all turned off at the same time, there I was, a free man. And I was never going back to live in an orphanage. Anyway, I was scrabbling up in the middle of winter up this balustrade to get to where I slept, and I slipped and cut open my chin, got infected, I fell asleep on a train, had blood poisoning, taken to hospital. Enough time for the police and the social workers to catch up with me. And what happened was I sent a nice guy called Jack Wise, who was a school teacher and had a small agricultural research teaching school for kids who were dysfunctional, and he came to my bedside and he said, "Look, you've run away from the orphanage so many times, you've got 2 choices. You can either go to Borstal, or you can come down to the south and go into this agricultural research training centre, which is like Borstal with grass." I'll do the grass. So I went down there, and it was the beginning of the rest of my life, because just down the road was a place called the Y Agricultural Research Centre, which was the Oxford and Cambridge of agricultural research in England at that time. So after a year of spending this indoctrination with young Jack, he got me a job as a junior laboratory assistant at this agricultural research centre. And this was when my life changed completely, because these were all career scientists. Many of them were Battle of Britain pilots. They all spoke with radar accents, that's Royal Academy Dramatic Art accents. And they got hold of me and they said, "Good Lord, Ray, can't talk properly. No idea what breed water with which wine. We're going to have to educate you." And of course they did. Over the next 4 or 5 years, they did a Pygmalion on me. If you buy the book, you'll see 2 pictures. There's one of me in the front row when I first got there, about age 15, 14 and a half, 15. And I'm sitting in the front row with the girls because I'm uncertain about who I am. 3.5 years later, I'm at the back with the professor's Italian suit, double-breasted suit, and I'm one of the boys. And you can imagine, you know, for me, the things that I wanted most in life at that time, because you have these dreams and ambitions for different stages in your life. For me, I thought what would make me happy. In the absence of my mother loving me, I thought the more women I could get to love me, the better I'd be. And the more money I could make, the better I'd be. And for about 15 years or 18 years, I gave it a good crack. Unfortunately, my wife refers to these years as my Tiger Woods years, which is a bit unkind. I refer to them as my years of due diligence. There was a lot of due diligence going on. It wasn't entirely my fault. It was the 60s. It was sex and drugs and rock and roll. I couldn't sing, didn't do drugs. So I developed, eventually, I lived in Canterbury, which was halfway between London and Dover. You couldn't do this today, but I had these relationships with a number of young ladies in London and in Canterbury and in Dover. Today you get busted by mobile phones. In those days you had to go to the end of the street and get a bus or whatever. So I was able to keep these relationships quite separate. Opportunities are also things that are important to you. I left the college and got a job as an analytical research chemist. And I was sent to London to set up a laboratory for acting as a reception centre. We had a laboratory in Canterbury which did all the testing, but we thought we could get a bigger client base by setting up a peripheral place in London, which was just an office to receive the products. They sent me up to London to set up this office, and I set it up. It was all going swimmingly, and then the company, the holding company, went bankrupt. And there I was in London without a job. So I kind of turned it on its head, because I could see that really they'd sent me up to set up a virtual laboratory to get testing done, you know, in a virtual way. So I just did that, and actually went out to other laboratories and got them to do the testing and sent the samples back to, or the results back to me, and I'd go out and find, because I had one blessing going for me. That Radar Academy of Dramatic Art stuff paid off. I was going to hunt bulls. Every weekend I was going to hunt bulls. If you've ever been to hunt bulls in London and the provinces, they say, hello, there was always 3 questions they ask you. Hello, who are you, where are you from? Or hello, who are you, where are you from, what you do? And Lord Norfolk's very famous for saying Norfolk, 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 because he owned Lord Norfolk, you know. But years later, when I was doing most of the sewage analysis in my chemical laboratories for the London Borough of Camden, when I was doing all the sewage analysis, I'd go to the hunt bulls and they'd say, who are you? I'd say, I'm Avery. Something in the city, I'm in sewage. So there I was, this huge man about town, and I started to be customer-centric and understand what customer-centric was, particularly in the area of seducing young women. Because if I wanted to seduce a woman from Knightsbridge, and she was very upmarket and you know, obeying, I would pick her up in my E-Type Jaguar. But if she was from a flower power child of the 60s, she might think that was too flash, you know, I was a bit too flash. So I'd pick her up in my antique MGA. Both of them would be locked and loaded with flowers, and chocolates, and champagne. And all of those women at some point in the week would end up in Canterbury, the same Italian restaurant. When the door would open and the maitre d' would say, sir, this is the most beautiful woman you've ever bought here. Because they were on the payroll. So I learned a lot about marketing just from trying to be somebody. But after 15 or so years of this, it was clear that I wasn't happy. And I couldn't understand why I wasn't happy. Everything that I wanted, it was a nightmare keeping all these women happy. Businesses were going okay. And I was just unhappy with myself. But I didn't know what to do. But then a defining moment was thrust on me. In the winter of 1972, I came off one of my motorbikes and hit a roundabout in the middle of the night. That's the good thing about people in England, you know, if you put a roundabout in the middle of a motorway that wasn't there when you went to work in the morning, and then put all these lamps around, you know, those little lamps you put a candle in, you know. Well, of course, the problem is they steal the bloody thing. So you come around the corner in the middle, it's dark, it's gone. So I rolled down the road, broke every bone in the left-hand side of my body, tibia, fibia, finger, collarbone, the whole lot, gone. Ended up in hospital for 3 months. Enough time for all those women buying me. At the same time. They weren't happy. I left New Zealand. I didn't actually leave for New Zealand for that reason. I packed up because I was happy with myself. And I arrived in New Zealand in 1973, and it was then that my life really began. Because when I arrived in New Zealand, I found a country that I loved, and a country that would change me forever. They say you should never write about a country within a week of arrival, because otherwise you start not to see. You start, just like looking at that, seeing it as something ordinary. You stop seeing things. When you first arrive in the town, you can see opportunities. That's why we have such a good immigration situation, because people who bring stuff here bring the opportunity of new ideas. So I arrived in 1973, an unscheduled flight at 4 a.m. in the morning because your air traffic controllers were on strike again. And I walked through the International's arrival terminal, which in those years was a big tin shed with open rafters. And flying around in the rafters were all these little sparrows. Walking around below were 4 or 5 guys in swan dries with air rifles shooting them. But hello, this is a country for me. The vermin problem, you shoot the buggers. It got better because as I got to the curb, the guy that I met on the plane, he was a nice Kiwi guy who'd come back from Europe. He said to me, look, Mum's meeting us at the airport and we'll give you a lift home and show you around New Zealand. Now, this was my first nomenclature problem because in New Zealand, your mum can be your wife or whatever, but in England, your mum is quite distinctly your mother. So when I got to the curb and saw him start pashing this woman about 18 years old who looked old enough to be his sister, I thought, hello, there's a bit of dueling banjos going on in New Zealand land, you know. Not healthy. But anyway, in the back of the Mini, which was going to take me to wherever they were going, was a couple of old people. There was grandmother and grandfather. They'd come back from Christchurch. And they already had luggage in the boot. This was a Mini, those old 850 Minis with no luggage rack, no nothing. And he had 2 other large suitcases when we came back from Europe. I had 2 other large rucksacks, camping paraphernalia, boots and all sorts of things. At that stage, I'd been educated by some of the best colleges in London. I knew about physics, volume, maths, weight. There's no way on God's earth we were going anywhere in this vehicle. It just technically wasn't possible. Anyway, we're driving on the motorway. and the old boys sitting in the front with one suitcase out like that and one on the roof. The young boys got both rucksacks like that, and I'm in the back with all the girls with the rest of the luggage, you know. We're barreling along this up motorway. And that's when I knew, implicitly, for Kiwis, impossible is just a starting point. Absolutely true. You forget who you are. None of the things that I've ever been able to achieve on the world stage would have been possible without that Kiwi, can-do, kick the ball out and run after it mentality. We are an extraordinary country. There's a book coming out in November called Us, and it's about us. It's about 50 New Zealanders, some of which you may have heard of, and some of which you may not have heard of. I'll give you a very practical example of how bad we are at celebrating how good we are as a society and an innovative nation. Another show of hands, who's heard of Colin Murdoch? Anybody Colin Murdoch? We've got one person. And every single one of you have been touched by Colin Murdoch. And probably 90% of people in the developed world and probably a large percent of the people in the developing world. And he invented something just through that one magical word of observation. Most of the developments in science and technology come about through one moment of observation. Nothing to do with guys in lab coats going into the laboratory trying to invent something, but simply being awake to the idea of things that are passing by. If you think about a spring, it's simply just a piece of wire bent around a pencil and annealed at 560 degrees centigrade. We bend it around a few times and make a paper clip. It's there all the time, but we forget to be able to see it. Colin Murdoch, pharmacist in Timaru, changed the world. What happened was his wife was writing the list to go to the supermarkets. Little big pen, 1952, stopped working. So he said, I'll make it work for you, Kiwi. Pulled it apart, had a look inside, found a little tiny bit of ink just at the end, and obviously that little plastic tube. He thought, if I could push something down there, I could get that last bit of ink out. So he sharpened up a few matchsticks, punched them down. While he was doing that, he thought, hello, went into the garage, fired up the lathe. When I'm telling this story in America, I say, every Kiwi's got a lathe in the garage. And off he did. Off he did, fired up the lathe, and put a little piston inside that bit of plastic, and invented the plastic disposable hypodermic syringe, which changed global healthcare. Before that, we were using glass syringes, which you used to have to wash out. And, things stick with you. I mean, I was in the orphanages, and I had my first polio injection with a glass syringe with the same needle. And trust me, you're always blessed that your name started with Avery. Started with Avery. You'll be right at the front of the queue. And these things stay with you. It's an education process. My two daughters are called Amelia and Anastasia Avery. These things stay with you. Anyway, good old Colin invented the plastic disposable hypodermic syringe. Not a multinational drug company from America. It was a guy from Timaru who had one moment of observation. He also invented the tranquilizer dart gun and tamper evidence seals and medicines, and nobody knows who he was. There's a guy called Peter Beck. You've never heard of Peter Beck, have you? No. Peter Beck is one of the people in the book. He sent off a rocket into interstellar space just 18 months ago, got a contract with NASA, because he came up with a better fuel than they thought of. And he was allowed to set it off in the Iraqi Gulf and send it into space, with a bit of backing from Sir Michael Fay. This book, what I was trying to understand in the book was what makes us specialist Kiwis. Is it that we have this innate DNA that makes us clever and come up with these inventions, or is it something else? It is actually something else. And it goes on to my next indoctrination of how I became a Kiwi. So here I am, just arrived in Kiwi land, finally got out of the Mini, and house prices were doubling overnight. So I thought, I better buy a couple of houses. I bought a couple of houses. One of them was on the side of Mount Eden. If anybody knows anything about Mount Eden, it's a volcanic cove. And a lava flow had gone rather inconveniently through the bottom of my basement. So much so that if I could dig it out, I'd have a 4-car garage under there. Technically doable. So now I was in the newfound land with no rules and regulations. I decided I would. Got a Kango hammer, drilled it into the scoria, and if you've ever done that, you'll know that scoria eats Kango hammers. Just drills in there, doesn't come out. Mother of all rock. So then I got a bigger one, a gas-operated one, and that got jammed. By this stage, an old boy across the road stumbled over, he was about 78. He said, "What are you trying to do?" Because he'd heard the noise. I said, "I'm trying to dig this out, make the garage." He said, "Come across to my place." Walked across the road. Underneath his house, there was a 4-car garage and carved out of rock, like somebody got knife and butter, just pulled the whole mountain and threw it away. Vertical walls, bit of damn brilliant. I said, "That's fantastic, that's what I want to do." "How'd you do that?" "Dynamite." Turned out he was the chief dynamiter at the Thames gold mine. And nobody would stop him. See, that's what makes us special. It isn't that we're innately clever, that people don't stop us from doing shit. Because we send a rocket up in America, people would complain. We can change the road rules on a weekend here. Imagine doing that in Italy, for Christ's sake. You're right. New Zealanders, we can do anything. And that's what makes us different. You can dare to dream here. So for me, that's what happened. I had no intention of continuing my career in science. I'd made enough money. I'd given up looking for the woman in white because quite clearly I'd really trawled the whole seabed, and nothing was turned up that was any use to me. Anyway, So there I was going to be a writer and a painter, and I started writing and painting and making furniture, and just relaxing basically, renovating all these villas. Because that's the great thing about renovating things in New Zealand. With a chainsaw and a skill saw, you can pretty much do anything. I love telling that Glenn Brown about all the decks I've built without a permit, you know. Fantastic. What a country we live in, you know. And, but of course, what happened was a friend of mine from the Auckland Medical School came to me and he said, look, you know about chemistry and stuff. Would you like to help set up the Department of Clinical Pharmacology at the Auckland Medical School? And if I'd have been born in England at that time and stayed in England, I'd have said absolutely no, there's no way, because my knowledge of human anatomy is very, very limited. And I was the sort of guy that would go for a medical. I remember going for a medical, and you know what you do when you're slightly intelligent? You whip out the x-ray as soon as you've had it done and have a look in the waiting room, you know. And mine had this huge cancerous growth in my left lung. And I went to the doctor and said, that's not right, is it? She said, that's your heart, you'll need one of those. So I wasn't really renowned for being au fait with gross anatomy. But I did indeed decide that we would help set up the Department of Clinical Pharmacology. And the professor at that time was from Canada. And I said to him, well, have we got a curriculum? And he'd already turned into a Kiwi. He said, no, we don't, we'll have to make it up. And I said, well, what's the best curriculum for pharmacology in the world? And he said, University of Aberdeen. I said, that's right, we'll take theirs. And we did, we copied it. And one of the experiments we had to do to treat pharmacokinetics and how anaesthetics work was to anaesthetise a fish. So you get a 5 kilogram salmon, you put it into a water bath, put in an anaesthetic while baying, and it would fall asleep, float to the surface. And then 20 minutes later, as the anaesthetic wore off, the oxygen got back into its gills, it would start to float away. Brilliant. You could time it all and do all the pharmacokinetics. It's fantastic. Imagine doing that in New Zealand with 200 students trying to find 200 5 kilogram salmon. Cost a fortune, right? So I went to the Hollywood Fish Farm down the road, it's a pet shop, and got 250 orange guppies. They're that big. They're goldfish, let's be honest. And then, of course, you have to do a dilution, get the dilution right. And so I did the calculation, got it wrong. They all died. Now we had 250 dead goldfish. My technician came to me and said, what to do? And I said, well, just put them down the toilet. It'll all be fine. Just flush them down the toilet. Make sure you flush it, it'll be fine. I had another defining moment when about an hour later there was a screaming coming from the female toilet because they'd effluxed out and they started to wake up and they were spawning. It wasn't one of my most defining moments, but we did indeed set up the best pharmacology teaching laboratory in New Zealand. And one of the things that was important was, because of my analytical testing laboratory skills, we set up another laboratory testing unit next door, which started to do bioequivalent studies for drug companies. This is where you prove that one drug is the same as another drug. This became a multi-million-dollar revenue-generating organisation. And it shows that you can have good business in science. And that was the start of me moving into another direction. What also happened, which is very important for all of you in terms of how you build businesses, successful business and successful entities, is that I was born with a desire to have a family that I never had. So what I did was I transposed that need into everything that I worked with. So the people that worked with me at the university became my family. I took that family with me later to a commercial drug manufacturing company and later to the work that we now do in developing countries. And they follow you because they are family. And the rules of our family are simple. If you have companies often that are involved in, say, manufacturing, you have these tribes. You always have tribes in different... The larger the organisation, the bigger the tribes. So the whole goals become separated. So you have production, you hate quality assurance production, hate marketing, and everybody hates accountancy. You know. So you have all these tribes. What you have to do is what I do, is to say, this is our company and I'm Dad. And your job is to look after Dad. And you're all my children and I'll teach you everything I know and you'll all be part of the family and you'll all look after each other. If anyone of that family decides to become Superman and try and climb over the backs of somebody else to become better, I want you all to put your hand in the air like that and go, start listening. Because they think they're Superman. And it stops them, it shuts them down. They start actually, when there's problem in production, they actually say, I stuffed up in production, but Brian from quality assurance helped me fix it. and it actually makes a more egalitarian society. So you need to build teams based around love and commitment, and rather than competitiveness. So what happened was we had this very successful business company, and then Graham Douglas from Douglas Pharmaceuticals approached me. He had 3 drugs that he had, nothing else much going for him, but he said, I want you to help set up a pharmaceutical manufacturing division for our company. And over the next 10 years, we turned out about 280 drug formulations. The important thing about this is this customer-centric bit. At that time, there were GlaxoSmithKline, Beecham, and a whole range of multinational companies making drugs in New Zealand. Big manufacturing divisions, big multi-million-dollar budgets. Today, there are none. Douglas Pharmaceuticals does all the manufacturing for those companies. So how did Douglas Pharmaceuticals overwhelm all of the wealth and power from these multinational companies? Quite simply because they were product-centric and we were customer-centric. They were product-centric in that they knew how to sell their products. They would have all these glossy brochures, and they'd go into the pharmacy and say, this is our diclofenac, this is our paracetamol, here's the glossy brochures. Those guys at Douglas haven't got glossy brochures, so their drugs can't be any good. Of course, the reality is that generic drugs have to be exactly the same as the multinational drugs, so they were the same. But that we also recognised we had no product marketing benefits by trying to sell something on the basis it was the same as a multinational. So we forgot about all that and we started to be customer-centric. We went to the pharmacist and said, what do you want? And they said, well, we want to build our businesses. If you could give us a bit of credit or a bit of bonus stock, that would help us build our businesses. And that's what we did. We went to them and gave them 3 months interest-free credit. We gave them a mobile phone. If they dialed 1, that was for diclofenac, 2 was 250, 5 was for 500. We helped them build their businesses. We went to the nurses in hospitals and said, what do you want? And they said, well, we're fed up with putting all these blister packs out. By the time we've done 250 paracetamol for all the patients, our fingers get sore. So I made a little reel on a reel. We pulled it out and it dropped out all the pills into little cups for them. So by being customer-centric, it's far more important than being product-centric. And I'll come back to that in the context of you guys. But it's absolutely rudimentary that you become customer-centric. If you wanted a better example of how to stuff up really badly with product-centric, you can go no further than January this year, where Eastman Kodak went bankrupt. They had $6.8 billion worth of IP and stuff around digital cameras. They never introduced a digital camera, although they invented it. They were product-centric. They kept selling their film. They didn't keep up with the competition. They didn't listen to their customers. You have to continuously relate back to your customers, not just at one reference point, but all the time. Education, there's a danger that you see products as the curriculum and products as the training. I'm standing before you to say, I didn't fit into any of that, and I'm a success. If somebody had taken the bother to understand that I was dyslexic or short-sighted, I might have had a better start. So observation is the key to that, the observation between the teacher and the student, and every student is different. There is no curriculum that fits every child. And if you get consumed with that product, you will lose some of the fish that had great potential. So that's the message about being customer-centric. Be customer-centric. It actually works. So at Douglas, we were very successful. My team and I would go into the laboratory late at night and do all these wonderful innovations. But there was still something in me. When I travelled from London to Kathmandu in 1973, I saw that I actually wasn't as badly off as a lot of people in the developing world, particularly through Africa and Asia. You could drive from London to Kathmandu, and things that I saw in Afghanistan, India, Pakistan, just were extraordinary in terms of poverty. But I didn't know what to do about it. It took me a long time. But then I met Fred Hollows, the eye surgeon, and I met him at some function, and he stuck a bony finger in my chest and said, stop making money out of sick people, you bastard. Do something useful with your life. He was a pretty gruff kind of guy. He died about 3 months after I met him. And I was actually on my way to Eritrea. He said, go to Eritrea and help me build this laboratory to make low-cost lenses. Don't worry about all the equipment, I've got that organised. You just bugger off up there. And I ended up in Eritrea at the end of the 30-year War of Independence. I left Fred literally on his deathbed. By the time I'd arrived there, Fred passed away. But I had promised him that I'd build this laboratory to make low-cost lenses. because we'd set up a business with the guys from Douglas. When I resigned from Douglas, I took my team with me. They're called the Wild Bunch. And the Wild Bunch and I started to build laboratories to make products all over the world in terms of medical devices and pharmaceutical plants. So we had all the skills to actually build a plant in Eritrea, and I was going to just do it as a scoping exercise to go there and see what could be done. But nobody could prepare you for being in Eritrea at the end of a 30-year war. I don't think any country in the whole world has had a 30-year war except for Eritrea. A whole generation out of 4.2 million people, 1.4 million were missing, dead, or lost in Great Spray. Nothing was working in the town. There was no working electricity, no running water. The rooms that they gave me at the Nyala Hotel had tiles on the floor. They weren't grouted in, they were just picked up from the bomb buildings around and placed on the floor. No running water, and so I went around town to try and find out where I could find all the makings to make a state-of-the-art lens laboratory. So I went to there was only one light in the whole street at night, and it had Osram, and I went there, and it was the electrical outlet for Osram that just set up following the 30-year War of Independence. And I said to the guy, "You got the electrical cable?" He said, "Yep." And he produced this one reel, and I said, "That's fantastic, I need 40 of those." He said, "That is the only one. We have recycled." So what's recycled? Every time the building was bombed, they'd go out the back and take all the wiring out of it and join it together. So it didn't matter what colour it was, it would be red, green, blue, whatever. It just changed colour all the way through, you know, which made wiring things up really exciting, I can tell you. But anyway, that wasn't working. I went to the plant printing place, which is a bit of an exaggeration. It was a hole in the wall with a couple of people fixing televisions and this very old Gesta machine where you could actually print plants. And what happened was, it was so thick, thin in print that you couldn't read it. So he said, "Come back tomorrow." I went back the next day, and it was all beautifully done in black, which was a bit of a surprise. And I said, "That's brilliant. I need about 10 of those." He said, "I'm terribly sorry. My daughter and I were up all night drawing the lines with rulers and ink." And that's what the country was like. Nothing worked. And I knew that we couldn't build that factory. So I queued on the only working telephone in town, went to the post office, and in front of me was an Abasha woman with a small child. They were all phoning relatives to tell them they were alive after the war and independence. And she had a baby on her back wrapped in a Abasha shawl. When she unwrapped the baby, the whole of one side of its face was missing, burned to the bone, the eye was gone, the cheekbone was gone, the shoulder was gone. And I'd never seen war up front and personal. And I didn't know what to do. I couldn't stand there and watch. So I left the queue, went back to the hotel. I went to the bar, and they had all these boxes of whiskey, and I said, "Give me a box of Johnny Walker Black Label." And he picked up the box and shook it, said, "It's empty." It was like the country. They were trying to put on a show of things working, but nothing was working. I remembered that I had a bottle of Chivalry in my carry-on bag, and I went upstairs and drank half of it in the dark, and I was reading stuff by an LED light from my alarm clock with no running water in my room, on a bed with a horsehair mattress and wire, basically chicken wire as a base. And I just went straight back to being under the railway bridge. I thought, in all the years that have gone in between, everything that's happened, you haven't really progressed in your life, Avery. You're still alone in the dark, you haven't found the woman in white, and you're unhappy. The best thing you can do is get out of this godforsaken country, go back to New Zealand and have a shower. Anyway, the next morning I got up, went down, phoned Gabby Hollows and said, "Gabby, it's going to be bloody near impossible to build this factory, but I guarantee that we'll do it." What happened in the middle of the night, the catharsis that happened was simply that I made the extrapolation that if there was one person who'd been built to do this one task in the whole planet, it was me. Some person who'd been annealed through the brutality of things in the orphanages, who had a band of brothers who could have the skills and the tenacity to build it, and I had the knowledge and the wisdom to overcome all the obstacles that were needed to make this factory work. And indeed we did. We made that factory work. It took about a year and a half. After a year, all the equipment arrived, and none of it worked. All the stuff that Fred had invented or bought, nothing worked. So I remember showing the head of the Fred Wallace Foundation at that time. I was in a pub with him, drawing on a napkin the piece of equipment that I thought could work to make to revolutionise the way that we made intraocular lenses globally. And he said, how much would it cost for you to make that equipment? And I said, well, to make 3 or 4 lathes, probably about $12 million US. And I went back to New Zealand. A week later, he phoned me up and said, I've got your money. So I had to go to work in the laboratory, and we did. We got this revolutionary technology that allows us to produce lenses 24 hours a day. And to begin with, nobody would buy them because they were made in Nepal and Eritrea. But then we went to the States and had them tested by the best lens experts in the world, and they came back with a report that said that our lenses were better than the multinational lenses at Alcon, were better than other lenses in the world. And then we started our marketing opportunities. And off we went. And because I realised that we could do that, we started to look at other things that were major killers in developing countries. And everything I've ever invented has come down to that moment of innovation. But I have to tell you that no matter how much innovation you have, it also comes down to whānau and that good management technique and having belief in yourself. And Kiwis have that in abundance. I remember at one point, during the building of the factory in Nepal, the war had rather inconveniently, in Eritrea, the war had rather inconveniently started up again. And we'd run out of aluminium siding to finish some of the ductwork for the air conditioning system. And the boys were downstairs in the quadrangle drinking beer. One of the first factories that the Kiwis had actually got going when they arrived in Eritrea was the brewery. Go to the brewery and actually buy at the back door a bottle of beer. Because these were the Tui boys, they just got that going. But of course we'd run out of aluminium siding, and they were worried about Dad, because I was upstairs scratching my head, knowing that I'd have to send them all back to New Zealand for at least 3 months to get stuff through the Sudan back to finish the job, and production wouldn't start. And so what happened was, I woke up in the morning and all I could hear was this grinding and sanding in the forecourt. And as I walked across to ask them where they got this stuff from, I could see the motorway signs being ground off. And they'd been out all night knocking over all the aluminium motorway signs. The motorway to Kerrith, gone. And that's because Kiwis don't give a shit. They just get the job done. It's the Anzac spirit. They just really get in there and rip in and got the stuff done. And that's what built the factory, that spirit of can-do attitude. And once we realised we could do that, we started to address other big issues. Protein, energy, malnutrition is a big killer in developing countries. And each year we throw away hundreds of thousands of tonnes of usable protein. When I came to New Zealand, I saw these Maori guys squeezing kiwi fruit onto a steak. And if you do that, it'll make the most crappy piece of steak taste beautiful, because it melts in the mouth. It's got an enzyme in it called actinase, which is the most potent protease enzyme on the planet. If you get a big lump of beef and stick it in the fridge for a week with a whole lot of kiwi fruit pulp, when you come back you won't find anything. It'll have dissolved it. So we can take waste streams from the kiwi fruit industry, mix them with waste streams from the meat industry, and produce these very, very high purity amino acid mixtures, which don't require digestion. But the other added benefit is that they go straight across the gut and repair damage done by rotaviruses. This is groundbreaking nutritional technology from good old Kiwi practical observation. I want to leave you with the thought that when I was living under the railway bridge, my dream was to own my own bicycle shop. And now I head up an international organisation that changes the lives of millions of people. By year 2020, there will be 30 million people with one of those lenses produced on lathes that I designed and made. We made that open source, so it's not just laboratories that we make lenses in, there's other laboratories both in India and as far away as Sri Lanka that use this technology and the US of A. The other thing about life is, in terms of how you measure success, is that if you start doing good stuff, and this is where you guys come in, every single one of you, or one of the other reasons that I helped in Eritrea was because that little kid with the burnt face. Somebody reached down and helped me at one pivotal moment in my life, and it changed everything. If Jack Wise hadn't reached down and helped me. And one of the blessed things that you have going for you as educators is, if you can make that connection with students, you can change the world. You can give these people a whole new set of dreams. So that's why I take my hat off to you, because you do change the world in your own way. Jack Wise, when I went to see Jack Wise, said, I really haven't achieved much in my life, and you're one of my star pupils. And I said to him, Jack, I wouldn't be here without you. what I've done is because of you. And sometimes that's what happens with teachers and mentors. They're the catalysts. And whilst they may be unsung, they're vitally important. The other practical thing is that if you're good, I actually believe good things happen to you. About 12 years ago, when I was in Nepal doing what my Greek priest now tells me is good work, I met the woman in white. She walked into the room and I fell in love with her. And because I had all those 18 years of seduction techniques up my sleeve, I was able to convince her that I was the best thing in town. Unfortunately, she was 20 years younger than me and very attractive, and she didn't want to tell Mum and Dad that she was actually going out with this geriatric. It's not all it's cracked up to be going out with a young woman, because I remember being at the Nepalese airport, going through customs, and there was this customs official there, and I must have touched Anna on the sleeve just as a sign of acknowledgement. And he said, "Are you together?" And I said, "Yes." I thought he was talking about the luggage, you know. I said, "Yes." And he said, "But she is much younger than you." And I said, "Yes." And then he smacked me on the bottom and said, "Naughty, naughty, naughty man." Only in Nepal. But my wife kept it a secret, or we thought we kept it a secret from her mum. And about 3.5 years ago, her mum said, she was pouring olive oil over the evening meal, and she said, "I've had enough, you two get married," because she knew all the time. And that allowed us to get married. Now, the beautiful thing about having a romance with a woman over 8 years, when you meet in different countries and you're doing good work, is you sit down and talk. You actually sit down before anything happens, you get off the plane and you have breakfast together and you sit and talk. And we still do that today. We have our breakfast meetings, which country are you going, where are you going to be. And about 4 years ago, we sat down and I said to her, "What do you think about having children?" Because neither of us is getting any younger. I was about 61. She was about 38 or something. And I said, she said, "I think we should have a crack." And I said, "Well, if you want to have a crack, you start now. Because the amount of Chardonnay that I drink, all my sperm are on my loads. I don't give a shit. You know? You go for it. I'm not bothered. No, you go for it. No." Anyway, it turns out that my sperm, not only are they on my loads, but they've got outboard motors. Because within a month of being in the same country at the same time, she was pregnant by her first daughter, Amelia, and about 17 months ago, our second daughter, Anastasia, was born. And again, it's not all of fear and skittles having being an older father. The plumber was round just a couple of days ago putting in a new bath, so the whole family could have a bath together. And he's there, he's one of those awfully fit plumbers, you know, six-pack. And he said, "How old do you think I am?" And I said, "Oh." He said, I said, "I don't look about 36. He said, "I'm 42. I said, "Well, you're in fantastic shape." He said, "Well, I do a bit of, you know, I've got this job and I do the weightlifting." And he looks at me, and he says, and by this time the two girls have arrived, Amelia and Anastasia, and they've both got their little paws looking in the sink, you know, at the plumber. And who's that there? And he said, "How old are you?" And I said, "I'm 65. He said, "They should have made you New Zealand of the Year just for that." So it's not all beer and skittles being an older parent. But the young guy in Rubber Bridge used to dream that he would own his own bicycle shop. And now, thanks to one teacher, I've done my own little bit to try and change the world. So I encourage you all to do what you do and do it to the best of your ability and become customer-centric. Every one of your customers is different. Try and find the way that you can connect with them and you'll be loved for the rest of your life. Thank you very much.